Before we hear from the next musical act, though, I wanted to talk to Mikey and Kodi really quick. Is that cool?
That's yeah, yeah. That's cool. That's fantastic. Let's talk to.
That
Let's
was
talk
my
to
like lobbing it to Long to be like, turn the video back on, and then there was a delay, and it was like,
Look, I was trying. I was really trying as quickly as I could.
Yeah,
He's
man, we're
he's been sweating
doing
all
our
day.
best.
And we're going to talk to you guys more in depth later. And again, as you guys hear them introduce themselves, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. But starting with Mikey, just can you tell us what Shakes on the Deck was conceived as, and then also what it has become during this time?
Yeah, it was conceived as a one-off show 2 years ago and is now a full 501c3 nonprofit theater that's been like organically growing probably a little too quickly, but like because we're like trying to manage a speeding train that's just like getting bigger.
Yeah.
And now is a total company that produces work that recommunalizes and makes Shakespeare more accessible, because it's gotten a little pretentious and a little privileged and a little, dare I say, boring. So our whole idea is to kind of just bring it back down to earth a little bit, to have a lot of fun, make it fun, have really good technique on the acting side. Like we really care about like actors' technique is very important to us. But to also not take ourselves too seriously. So now we've moved into the virtual world, because like every other company, we're trying to survive and thrive. Mainly thrive. We're doing pretty okay.
I think we're doing great. Yeah.
We're doing great. But yeah, that's kind of where we are. So I'd say young, brash, and probably making a lot of people mad in the way that we do things, but
good. Before, just in case people can't stick around, you have a show, you've accomplished a digital show successfully. You did Measure for Measure. And you have another one coming up, which is one of the reasons we have Kodi with us, who is also in Measure for Measure and was fantastic.
Thank you.
As was Mikey, who is also fantastic.
mm-hmm.
But can you talk a little bit about what's coming up and how people can find more information?
Yeah. So something that we found really interesting in our last minute speed, Measure can't happen in person anymore. We have to create a Zoom show, and like all of the madness that came with that. We kind of fell upon a couple different techniques that we found really interesting because we were a cast that was already working together and was getting tested regularly and was, working safely together. One of, I think, the huge discoveries from Measure was the mobility that is given to actors who can use technology in a very mobile way. So we had a character that kept hopping onto Zoom on their cell phone and was doing direct address to, as if they were vlogging almost. So that kind of like lit all of our brains up for the next show, being like, oh man, we have, we're a resident company within a hotel. Like we have this whole hotel. We can put cameras wherever we want and stream them all onto one screen. So we have a production of Hamlet coming up that's going to be end of January, beginning of February. And the premise is, the Zoom screen is going to have kind of 4 to 6, we're still working on the adaptation, different cameras around the hotel. And it's going to feel like for the viewer, they've been accidentally granted access to the security cameras of the Castle of Denmark. And you're going to be able to see the actors living out their lives throughout all of the cameras. So if there's a scene happening, with Hamlet and Gertrude in Gertrude's bedroom, because we've got these hotel rooms that we can kind of redeck out, you can also at the same time see Ophelia having dinner with her brother or her father in a different room. Even though they're not speaking, it'll feel like you're watching this almost 24-hour cycle of these people just like passing in the night. And I think so much of Hamlet also happens off stage. And I think there's something really interesting in allowing the audience to either see it or not. You can choose to speaker view and it'll just pop up the scenes that have dialogue. Or you can kind of like play the Easter egg game and be like, oh, what's happening in this corner? Like, why are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern like hiding in the corner here? Like, that's not supposed to be happening. So we've got a technical director signed on to help us with all of that, and a bunch of the team from Measure is coming back because there was a lot of learning that happened with technology.
I mean,
But yeah,
you're
we're all super
making a
excited.
new art form basically, right? Because it's not theater, it's not film, it's not
Right.
even like what you're describing reminds me a lot of Sleep No More or like other interactive theater experiences
Yeah.
where you can experience things, but it's not even that because you still have a
Right.
camera that is deciding what you're seeing. So
What
it's
is
a new
seen.
art form really that you're sort of
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
inventing.
And with Measure too, like our spaces allow us like to come back earlier than other theater companies because our seating's untraditional. So we picked Measure because we could build a COVID concept into the show. So like people get in trouble for touching in that show. So it made sense that it was like, well, if we designed
Literally the plot.
the total plot. So I'm like, okay, well, let's design a speakeasy where you come in one way into our venue, which is this huge industrial room, and then you leave the other. So you're just enter this whole little world, like 45-minute show. Yeah. And then we had to go virtual. But what we discovered with Measure in virtual theater is that one, if you do everything you're supposed to do, you can't have 6 actors in a room safely. We were masked the entire time. And two, that like my big thing is always keeping the audience in mind. So no matter how we do a show in the virtual, I never want people to sign on and be like, just watch us act over here on camera. Like I want to figure out ways in which we can get them involved pre-show, during the show, post-show. Like what are our character relationships to a camera? Like how does that become our audience? And yeah, it was definitely a learning experience because we're taking a medium that does not work for this. Make it work.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that that has to be the mindset that you come in with is what am I going to give to the audience that only this kind of production can offer? Because like we were just saying, I mean, if I'm going to watch something on a screen, there's stuff with huge budgets doing it pretty high quality, right?
Yeah.
So I can't do it that way. So how can I do it and make it interactive? I don't know. Very interesting. And that production of Hamlet sounds fucking cool. Like that sounds cool.
We're excited.
Yeah, I have an adaptation to finish.
So Mikey's
Hamlet's
doing
one of the longest Shakespeare plays that you have to figure
right.
out.
Also like folio quarto argument.
Proposal for was 3 plays that I put into one. Let's talk about a long adaptation to streamline 3 shows that were not written connected to connect them. That was hard.
But you did it.
Still alive to tell us about it. Thank
We're
you.
here.
We're going to talk to you guys more in a little bit. Guys, if you have questions about the way they're doing digital theater or just like, I'd love to talk about it conceptually a little bit too, we'll come back to that later.
Or about how Shakespeare has transformed into boring things, because I agreed with that. And how can we make it better for the rest of the public?
What are we doing next, guys?
We're going to talk to Shakes on the Deck again.
Yes. My favorite.
And ask them some more questions and get into this Shakespeare thing.
So, okay, I have a question. I'm sure other people have questions, but I have a burning question.
Okay.
So, but it requires sharing something that happened in Measure for Measure. Okay. So for those of you familiar with Measure for Measure, I am about to refer to the scene between Angelo and Isabella where he's a creepy creep and is like, if you sleep with me, I'll let your brother go. For everyone else not familiar with Measure for Measure, just imagine Frollo and Esmeralda. And if you are not familiar with that,
Hi.
okay.
Who is Frollo?
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Is that like a Rolo?
That's Quasimodo.
chocolate?
Hold up.
Okay.
No, we like Quasimodo. We don't like Frollo.
Oh.
Anyway.
Don't like Frollo. He's a creep. For those of
It's
you
like
familiar
ice cream and
with either
froyo.
of those things, aka long,
Yeah.
just imagine like a person in power asking a woman who is not in power in this situation if she will sleep with him in order to get something she wants.
Which in this instance is her brother to not be executed.
Yeah, she doesn't want like a sandwich.
Stakes are
She wants
high.
her brother to not die. So when you guys mentioned a little bit that during Measure for Measure, you started playing with like all these different cameras that you could have. And that was my favorite part of the play because Mikey, who was playing Angelo, Creep Town Man, starts like walking to each of the cameras and covering them, so that as he's doing this horrible, disgusting thing, he's closing it off, and like it was amazing. So I was wondering if you could like talk a little bit about the process of like how to incorporate you started already, but how to incorporate the cameras into a theater piece, what you learned from Measure, and what you're like hoping to carry into Hamlet.
Yeah, for that particular moment, I can say, because it was such a whirlwind of transitioning from like all of a sudden we're doing it live to LA re-shutting down, that it was just like a whole new medium. That actually didn't even come to me as an idea until probably like 2 days before we had a live stream audience, because the scene wasn't working and I couldn't figure out why. And it was because I didn't know Angelo's relationship to the camera. And it wasn't until we introduced Libby bringing in the camera and using it against him in a scene. So all of a sudden he ignores everybody because that's who he is. It was like, that was the aha moment of, I was like, what happens actually if he realizes they're there, acknowledges it, and then is like, I don't like this, but too dumb to know to like, turn off the sound.
Right. Well, and then there was like a whole like progression of that. Like that was the original like iteration of it. It was like all the cameras going back and you just hearing the sound. And then we were like, oh my God, what if and we were literally like Sharpieing little like cards and like putting it over the camera to like black it out. It was great. We have lots of money. So there was one of the cards where we like decided to poke a little hole in it. And I actually stood next to that camera. And as Mikey goes around and covers each of the cameras, after he covers the third one, I would slide that over a little bit. So there's literally like a peephole. So the audience isn't totally locked out. So it's sound, but then one of the cameras, there's like a little corner where you don't really see the actors. Sometimes they kind of move in and out of that little tiny cutout. But like that added a whole new level of like, okay, now the audience is the one that feels like they're on the outside. Like up until that point, they've had this connection either with the Duke or with Lucio, where they're being brought into the action. They're being talked to and spoken to directly, and all of a sudden they're like being shut out. Yeah, I thought that was a really cool thing for Mikey to bring into the rehearsal room. And then like the whole company was like, oh yeah, and this, and this. And we just started kind of running with it and getting creative with the cameras.
I don't know about. Go ahead, Mikey. How would we make it better?
So it was based in the text, and it was based on what was happening in the scene. Like none of our measure choices came from like what's cool and what could we do. It was like, no, like what's our relationship with the camera and the people behind it.
Well, as a result, though, like that's why it was cool, though, is because it was so genuine to that moment. It is so exactly what would happen. That's why it was so great.
Yeah, I really did enjoy the show too. And for me, I'm pretty critical of if someone is doing something to try to be artsy. We call that artsy fartsy. And that was not artsy fartsy. But I want to bring this up to the group of like, I feel like with what you said, I mean, what the company is, right? Shakes on the Deck, what it is trying to attack Shakespeare and make it understandable, relatable, cool, whatever to the public. And I feel like a lot of times when people are doing Shakespeare and putting a new twist on it or something, that they are doing something just for the sake of doing a twist, and it's more of like exploring themselves instead of exploring the art in order to explore yourself. You're nodding like you agree. I was going to ask if you guys agree, or is that just me hating Shakespeare and being judgy? Because sometimes I'm like, I'm too judgy. I'm hating this show for no reason, but there are reasons.
Kodi could vouch for the fact that I probably walk into every rehearsal, well, 3 shows with me now, that I'm like, this is about you. I like to tell actors that. I'm like, this isn't about you. It's not about me. It's about the story. And especially with Shakespeare, like, people, this, like, first of all, this didn't even happen in London. Like, he performed on the South Bank with a bunch of whorehouse. Oh, can I say that? Sorry. Brothel.
You can say whatever you want.
Beep that live of a bunch of like brothels for like people who were illiterate, like, you know, and responding. And it's just so fascinating that this has become so much about watch me, the actor, do Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Sorry.
Well, and I think like, go for it.
Oh no, go ahead, Kodi.
I was just gonna say, it's like, I think to your point, there are so many Shakespeare companies and shows that are like, oh, what are we gonna do with this? Like, what if we put it in World War II? What if we do this with it? What if we do this with it? And I think what I found so refreshing when I first started working with Mikey and Shakes was we weren't doing anything with any of it. We were almost going in the opposite direction and going, okay, everyone's going to be in black. There's going to be like one thing that we're doing with this. And like with Titus, it was like, okay, the blood is white until it's red. Great. That's all we're doing. We're not picking a new time period or accents or new strange costumes. Like, let's strip it down and pick something so simple that's going to serve the story. And I think that's what makes it so much more accessible.
Well, and I was just going to say, as a high school theater teacher, at festivals and things, you see high school directors that are like, all right, I'm going to do Shakespeare with a weird twist just because. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense, I guess. You know, the amount of times I've seen hipster Shakespeare, not cool. Like Shakespeare with flannel and brown vest.
Or in the South, where we're from, Shakespeare with
the Hatfields
in the Appalachian Mountains. They make everyone hillbillies.
Yeah.
Just so we can understand.
But it's already like, I feel like, isn't it already hard enough to understand without that? Like, even like, I'm like, I don't know what this means. I'm just kidding.
All you need is a little Shakespeare talking like this. That's all you need.
Yeah. Then they're like me. I get it now.
Now I get it.
Romeo, where art thou, Romeo?
Long production. So I expect your I can't wait to zoom in for that one.
There will be
that's
a
all right. It's done. It's done.
Shakes on the Deck collaboration that is just a horribly done Romeo and Juliet, and it's just both Jonathans. Nobody else is in it. It's just both Jonathans.
There's video out there of Romeo and Juliet with me and DJ when we did Shakespeare Abridged. And so
yes.
Good show.
If we do Romeo and Juliet with just me and you, Jonathan, can I play Romeo and Tybalt?
Yes. I am here for that.
We're so here for that.
That fight scene will be fun.
As long as you're the nurse and I'm Juliet.
Okay, sure.
I just need you to be the nurse and take care of me. But
wait, before we like fully cast and develop this show live on the air,
yeah, do we have questions in the chat? Other than we got to our questions.
I have more.
Chat.
People are saying they would pay to see that. That's all I have.
Me too. Let's see it. Come on, Jonathan.
Making show. So like, let us know.
I was gonna say, you just found a show that's gonna make you money, so
And
lock it up. But I will say, to go back to like Shakespeare. Okay, so I have taught a good bit. Long teaches full time. I teach a good bit too. But I taught an 8th grade Shakespeare class. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about how I did it. What would you guys do in order to kind of like break that wall down?
LOL, I did teach an 8th grade Shakespeare class in a Southside bilingual Chicago public school for many years.
Talk about that for a while.
What would you do? And I was like, what did I do? It's not about training actors. It's about like, you go in, like for me, I looked at the core curriculum. It's like you're teaching collaboration, you're teaching public speaking, you're teaching analyzation, research, character development, like everything they would get in a lit class. And then you make it fun. Like you do fun exercises. Like you it's like you come from it from an 8th grade. Like, what do they care about? Like, you give the boys the sword. Actually, you give the girls the swords. Shoot, I had girls like with foam swords taking each other out left and right. But like I was like, yeah, it's you approach it from a human standpoint. Like, you know, like how do you get an 8th grader to understand Shakespeare? At the time, Empire was huge. I was like, every Empire episode of Shakespeare, these 8th graders like, Empire, we love that. And I'm like, you probably shouldn't, but like that's fine.
But you do, so I'm going to use it.
You're gonna
But
roll.
we're gonna go with
That's
it.
fantastic.
Go with it because
Empire.
because I watched every episode. So I was like,
Great. Okay, so key
Yeah,
to
I
teaching
think
middle
that's-
schoolers, Shakespeare, Empire. Got it. That's all I said for that.
I think that's something that you have to remember is like Shakespeare, Mikey touched on it, but Shakespeare was written for the masses. It was not only written for the masses, it was written for the masses who were not there to pay attention at all. Like there were 18 million other things happening, which is part of why Scansion's so wonderful. But like it was soap operas. He was writing soap operas, and I think we forget that sometimes. And I think, like Mikey said, you have to make it fun. I worked with New Orleans Shakes for a while, and I was part of their touring company called Shakes on the Road. And we would bring this show with little bits of famous scenes and also information about Shakespeare's life. We'd bring it to schools, and it was like we would do the opening of Romeo and Juliet with water guns, and we would like grab kids to come up and shoot water guns with us, and like someone would be Sylvia, and like someone would get to serenade someone else, and there'd be like a recorder. Like you have to incorporate those elements because Shakespeare is fun, and I just think the academia part of it all makes us forget that sometimes.
Yeah, if your first introduction to anything is an assignment, then it's typically not going to turn
not
out
fun.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Water guns. I
It's
know we're
fun.
about to get to Alex's last song, but Megan, do you have any questions? / is anyone in our chat?
I've got one more question. It's actually 2 questions. You can answer both of them, or you can pick one of them. What? Since it seems like Broadway's shut down until June, we're going to be in whatever this is theater-wise for a little bit longer. What do you want to see develop further, especially with Shakes on the Deck and what you're going to accomplish with Hamlet? Or what, when everything goes back to quote unquote normal, do you want to carry out of this time and start incorporating into live performances again?
well, I plan on coming back live sooner than later because we can.
Not a Broadway house. You don't have like.
And we have an open air deck too.
Yeah.
So
we have an open air deck, but we're tapped to do measure for measure on the deck at some point. We've tested it out live to keep people safe. And I mean, I think adaptability, like we're doing Angels in America next May, which is 7 hours long, 2 parts, like this epic, very language-based piece.
Yeah.
And the challenge was everyone's like, I can't do theater anymore. And I was like, or you just reconceptualize and make it work. I don't know. Like, I hope what we come out, not just in Shakespeare, but in theater, is we deconstruct the standard, the restrictive standard that has been set for us. And we move into a new era of what theater can be.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's learning to embrace restrictions as opposed to see them as barriers to creation, if that makes sense. Like, I think that's what Mikey did so wonderfully with Measure, was all of these rules came into place, and so many theaters were like, we can't, we are stopped. And Mikey was like, yeah, but like, what if we went, okay, and like create something with them. And I think there's something about that mentality that just comes from being such a young company. Like, why not? We're not doing anything else. Like, we don't have a whole like lineup that had to get shut down. We don't have guest actors flying in. Like, I also understand that that is a big part of what's happening at a lot of companies. But like you said, we have a very adaptable space, and we're young, and we're able to do shows with small casts in a very safe way. Why not embrace all these new rules instead of kind of feel like we're being told we can't?
Well, to be honest, I think that's like one of the best lessons that theater has given me in general, is that limitations can be very liberating. I know that those are my favorite memories of like when something went wrong and how we fixed it. Right.
Well, and it's just funny you talk about that adaptability because, being a high school teacher in South Carolina, if I didn't find something or some way to still do theater this year, they didn't need me. And so immediately, first thing when I got my budget, I'm like, okay, here's what we're doing. We're buying film equipment. We're buying a new Mac. I'm going to be editing stuff. We're going to be making film of some sort, even though it's not theater per se. You're still going to get some type of acting stuff in class. So my kids have written short films. Some of them are pretty damn good. And they're going to be performing and producing and directing and acting in their own short films here shortly once the Mac comes in, because I ordered it 2 months ago and it's still not here. So, but once it's
Apple,
here,
if you're listening, can you expedite that, please? Thank you.
please.
Hey,
It's been 2
Apple.
months. It's been 2 months.
If you're listening, yeah. If okay.
Apple's always listening. Hey Siri, are you listening?
Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Kodi and Mikey, really for being on our show and for what you're doing, because I think it's really important. Spreading art is always important, especially if you have good intentions. And where you guys are at, talking about the way you talk about telling the story and how you put that first is actually refreshing. You would think it's common sense, but like when you say it, it feels like common sense, but it's refreshing because not everybody thinks that way. So.
Yeah, because it's not.
And before we move on, Mikey, can you tell everyone where to find Shakes on the Deck? Especially since you don't have to be in LA to watch it. Like Hamlet will be digital. You don't have to be in LA.
So you can go to shakesonthedeck.com.
Groundbreaking.
Well timed. Very well timed.
Instagram Shakes on the Deck. I was like, I don't know. Where do you find us?
Yeah, those are the two.
Where's
Website
the-
and Instagram.
But where's the
Deck.
Shakes on the Deck TikTok?
Young company, come on.
We need younger people for that.
We don't have that. We don't have that either.
They're not 12.
That's real.
Accurate.